Hi, I'm Kathy Babbitt, and this is part of the series of Loving Living Gluten-Free, and all of these recipes are based on what is in this book. And you can get this book on Amazon, you can get it on Nook, you can also get it directly from Author House, who is the publisher. And again, this is Loving Living Gluten-Free. Don't worry about trying to write all of this down because you can actually get the recipes off the website, which is www.lovinglivingglutenfree.com. That's all one word, Loving Living Gluten-Free, or thebabbitts.net. And again, these recipes are going to be on there. So if you want to take notes, that's great. But don't worry about writing it down. Or if you miss something, don't worry about it. You can also search for the recipe on the blog section. And if you have any questions, just write the question in there and I will get it and I will answer you back. So this is the book, and again, you can get it on Barnes & Noble, you can get it on Amazon, you can get it from me. If you want a signed copy, just send me a message on the website. So let's get started. Today we're going to be making cream puffs and eclairs. Primarily we're making cream puffs, but it's the same dough. It's a pâte à choux. Some people call it a choux paste dough. It's very simple to make. A lot of times when you see it in the pastry, like in the pastry counter at the grocery store or at your favorite bakery, it looks really difficult, but it's not. And we're going to kind of demystify some of that today. So we're going to start over here on the stove. And the first thing we need to do is we need to bring a cup of water and one stick, half a cup of butter. Now you can use a butter substitute if you want. I personally really like, if you're casein free, I like the Earth Balance soy free blend. You don't have to do soy free, that's a preference for you. But we're going to bring that to a boil. Now I've already gotten my flour mixture here. And in here is 1 cup of my flour blend, which is, it's on the website, but it's equal parts by weight. And this really matters on this one. There's not a substitute that I have found. So it's equal parts by weight of white rice flour and cornstarch. And then half that amount of one of those in brown rice flour. So it's going to be, when I make it, I make a large batch. So it would be 1 pound of white rice flour, 1 pound of cornstarch, and a half a pound of brown rice flour. And before you measure it out, you're going to want to make sure that you mix it really, really well. Sift it, all of that, so that when you actually are using it, you're getting the right amount. And to this, I have added my xanthan gum. Now to the water mixture here, I'm going to add, and that's a half a teaspoon of xanthan gum. And to the water mixture, I'm just going to add 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. Now you're going to want to stir this, mix it. And we're going to let that come to a boil. Okay, so we're back, and our water is coming to a boil. And so with this coming to a boil, what we're going to do is, I have my xanthan gum in my flour and I've stirred it. Okay, so I'm going to turn this down because I don't want to scorch it. And while it's boiling, I'm going to dump this in all at once, all at one time. Getting a little stragglers out of there. Okay, and then you start stirring. And it's going to be lumpy. It's not going to stay lumpy, but at this point it'll look a little lumpy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my timer for 2 minutes. The 2 minutes is so that I'm cooking the starchy taste out. Otherwise it's going to have a cornstarch flour taste. So you want to keep it low and you want to stir real vigorously. And you might get a film that kind of develops on the bottom of the pan. I'll show that to you. You kind of, I don't know if you can see that real well, but there's like a film in there. You might get that. That's normal. Some of the butter separating out is also normal. Those aren't things that you need to worry about, but you do need to keep cooking it for that full 2 minutes, or like I said, you're going to get, it'll be starchy tasting. It won't taste right. So just keep stirring it. You don't want it to scorch. That's part of the stirring it. The butter as well as the flour will scorch really easily. And once you get that scorched taste, there's really not anything you can do about it. 36 seconds left. And you can really see that film start to develop on the bottom of the pan. And like I said, that's perfectly normal. It gets really stiff and hard. Okay, we're almost done with this. So I'm going to turn that off, and we're done with that. Now, this next part is where I've seen a lot of recipes, formulas in the baking room go wrong. We're going to put this in my stand mixer right here. And as you can see, it's kind of a large clump. Now, in some recipes I've seen, they leave out a key factor, and that is you've got to cool this down before you add the eggs. So I'm going to turn this on. I've got a thermometer right here. I'm going to turn this on, and I'm going to start to lower the temperature of this. And it really, and all of these instructions are in here, and the reason why you need to do it. But you need to get this down to 120 to 130 degrees. Otherwise, when we add our eggs, you're going to curdle the eggs. And what that simply means is you're going to have cooked eggs in your pâte à choux. So we're gonna start mixing this. You'll want to stop it periodically and take the temperature. And again, you're trying to get it to 120 to 130 degrees. Your egg whites cook at a very low temperature. Your egg yolks a little bit higher, but egg whites are going to cook at about 149 degrees. Egg yolks at 165. So if you take this straight from the stove and put your eggs in here, as I've seen in some formulas, it's not going to work for you. Right now, and it's already mixed for a couple of minutes, it's still at 160 degrees, which is too hot. We are at about 145 now, so it's not too much longer. We need to mix this for. So I'm at 130 degrees now. Just to be on the safe side, I'm going to mix it for just maybe another minute, just to make absolutely certain that I've got it low enough temperature. having a thermometer in the kitchen is really important for a lot of these recipes. You'll notice on some of the bread recipes I'll say to cook it to a certain internal temperature. That'll have to do with the bread being very dense, and anytime you have a bread that has eggs in it, it really should be cooked to 190 to 200 degrees, which is past the point when you put a skewer in it that it'll come out clean. So you'll think that the bread is cooked enough, and it not necessarily will be. Okay, so now we are at 120 degrees, which is exactly where we want to be. When you add your eggs, it's a good practice to always add your eggs one at a time and crack them into a separate dish. The reason why you do that is if, for instance, you get an eggshell in there, you can get it out. If you get an egg that's bad, you won't have added it to everything and then have to throw all of your batter away. So we're going to add the eggs one at a time, and we want to mix until they're completely incorporated in. As with any baked goods, always scrape the sides and scrape the beater as necessary while you're mixing. There's really no set time to do it, but as it looks like it's starting to kind of build up on the sides of the beater, go ahead and scrape it. And if you notice, my stuff is green. So I've got a green special here, I've got a green whisk. I live in a blended household, which means somebody in my family, my husband, eats gluten and I do not. So in our house, and everybody's different, but in our house, green means go for me and red means stop. So any of the things that I use for his cooking that would have flour on it or any kind of gluten containing ingredient is going to be red. So then I know not to use it, because rubber spatulas, these are one of the areas that cross-contamination can occur very easily. So we'll get our eggs mixed in. We got one more to go. So once I've got everything mixed in, I'm going to scrape the sides down again. I'm going to turn the mixer on and I'm going to mix it for 5 minutes. After it's mixed for 5 minutes, I'm going to let it stand for 5 minutes. As we talked about in other videos, part of the challenge in working with your gluten-free flours is the absorption of moisture. And since we have so much white rice flour, which is our main culprit with absorbing moisture more slowly, that's why we have the stand time. So that the mixing is just to make sure everything's incorporated really well, but the stand time is to allow the white rice flour to absorb some of the moisture. So, all right. Okay, so we mixed it for 5 minutes, and we're going to take it off. And this is what it looks like inside there. So I'm going to scrape down my beater, and I'm going to scrape down the sides, and then I'm going to let it stand for another 5 minutes so that we can get some of that moisture absorbed into that flour. And that really makes a huge difference. When you buy, a lot of us when we first started going gluten-free and they started coming out with products in the grocery store, and we're like, oh wow, cookies, brownies, oh cake. I have a funny story about cake. But anyways, you make the cake mix, you make the brownies, you make the cookies. The chocolate chip cookies specifically. The first time I made those and they came in a little package and I was all excited, they were like eating sand. It was bad. It was really, really bad. So, knowing what I know now, and if you've done that and bought those cookies and y'all know which one I'm talking about, and they're really bad, buy them again. No, really, buy them again. Take them home, make them just exactly the way it says on the package. After you get them all mixed together, cover the bowl with plastic wrap and walk away. just walk away. Come back about 30 minutes later, spoon them up, put them on the cookie sheet, throw them in the oven and bake them. You won't be able to tell the difference between them and regular cookies. The difference is, and a lot of the manufacturers are getting better about putting it on in the directions to let them stand, but in the early days, we didn't really know a lot as much as we do now, so they didn't. So they would tell you just to make them like you did regular cookies. Well, they're not regular cookies. They're not ever going to be regular cookies because they don't have gluten in them. So make them, but just let them stand, walk away, and come back 30 minutes later and put them in the oven, and you will be amazed at the difference just by giving them the time to be able to absorb the moistures the way they need to. And that's also why with the breads and the pizza crust and stuff like that, the yeast breads and pizza crust that need to rise, you'll notice that they rise slower. So sometimes, like the pizza crust in the book says to let it stand for 30 minutes, pan it up, and then let it stand for another 15 minutes. If you want a really thick crust, just let it stand for an hour. And then put it on the pan, let it rest for 15 minutes before you put it in the oven. Because that extra time allows the moisture to absorb, and then it starts to rise. Because it's not going to start to rise until the moisture has been absorbed. Once the moisture is absorbed, then the yeast can start doing its thing. Otherwise, it just hasn't done it yet. So it takes it a little longer than it does regular bread. But we're going to let this stand for 5 minutes, and then we will start panning it. Okay, so it has stood for the 5 minutes that we needed it to stand for. And again, these recipes are in my book, and it's called Loving Living Gluten-Free Recipes That Work. And all of the recipes that are going to be covered in the series that I'm doing on how to actually execute these recipes will be out of this particular book. Now, the panning of it, it kind of talks about it a little bit in here, but I'm actually going to show you how to pan it. If you have not preheated your oven at this point to 450 degrees, do so now. It's going to take us a few minutes to be able to get it panned up so that it'll give your oven time to heat. Typically in baking, you should always preheat your oven. So if you haven't turned your oven to 350 degrees, please do so now, and try to make sure that the light goes off saying that the oven's hot before you put them in, because this particular recipe really needs to go into a hot oven. Okay, so in panning these, there's a couple of different ways you can do this. The recipe, as I said in the beginning, that we're doing today is primarily cream puffs, though I am going to show you how to make some eclairs too. Let me just adjust this so you can see a little bit better. There you go. Okay, so we're going to be making mostly cream puffs, but I'll show you how to do the eclairs again. So what we're going to do here is I have this scoop, and it's just a small scoop. I don't know what number it is. Looks like it's an 18/8 scoop. You can get these in the grocery store. You can get them at Sam's. You can get them pretty much anywhere. You can get them at Walmart. And it's just a little scoop. This is the size of my hand. This right here is a half a cup. So you can see it's a pretty small scoop. Okay? And what I'm going to do, now the whole idea is these puff up and rise. That's why they call them cream puffs. So you want to start out with a small amount, because if you start out with a large scoop, these are mini ones. Now if you're making these, and they're still going to be big, you'll be surprised. If you're making them and you want to be bigger, you can make them with a bigger scoop. If you want like the big ones, you know. But these I'm taking to a party tomorrow with a lady who's gluten-free and sugar-free, and there's no sugar in here. And in a minute, after we get this done and in the oven, I'm going to be making some sugar-free frosting and sugar-free cream cheese filling for this, which is really kind of cool, especially if you're dealing with hyperactive children, diabetes, that kind of thing, because we're going to make the filling and we're going to make the frosting with honey. It will be made with butter, but if you're dairy-free, again, the Earth Balance soy-free, dairy-free blend works really well. When I work with clients that are dairy-free, that is what I use and have used in all of these recipes. In the book, it makes note when you can use a dairy-free substitute. So, and when you can use like coconut sugar, you can use coconut sugar. And in the book, it has the filling. It's a pastry cream filling, and you can use coconut sugar for that. And that's what you would use if you were making the eclairs. Is you would use a pastry cream filling. And you can use coconut sugar for that. but the lady at the party that I'm going to, she's sugar free, so we're not, that's why we're not doing eclairs, because they have sugar in them. Now, if you want to do eclairs, cream puffs are round, okay, eclairs are, they're kind of oblong. This right here is a disposable pastry bag. You can get these at Walmart, you can get these at Target, you can get these at Hobby Lobby, Michael's, any place that they do decorate, they have an area for cake decorating supplies. You can get these bags, you can order them online. This specific is a Wilton brand, but you don't have to get a Wilton brand. And if you're decorating a cake, you can use these. If you're writing on a cake, you can use these. They're a great go-to. They're disposable. When you don't give me, just throw them away. You don't have to try to wash them and all that stuff. So this one I've cut the end off. And we're going to pipe this in a small, and again, if you're making a regular size eclair, you're going to pipe it longer, 4.5, 5 inches probably. But these are minis, so I'm just going to pipe small ones, and they'll have a little tip on them. So I'm just going to kind of bend that back. And these all rise up. So even though they look little, they'll be a little bigger when we make them. You just kind of fold that back on itself, just like that. But I'm just going to I just wanted to make a couple to show you. So that's what those look like. And they're just, these are the eclairs and these will be the cream puffs. Now, if you want, instead of using the scoop, and if you're making a mix and you've got it in your bag anyways, you can always use the bag to also make a cream puff. And you just pipe it up straight, just like that. That one's going to be a little big. So, I'm going to put these, and I still got some more batter in there, but I'm going to put these in the oven. Now, when you're cooking these, you want to cook them in 2 different steps, and it covers this in the book. The first you're going to do is you're going to bake them in the 450-degree oven for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, you're going to leave them in the oven, but you're going to reduce the temperature down to 375, and then you're going to cook them for 15 to 20 additional minutes until they're done. So it's a 2-step process. So we're cooking them really quickly for 20 minutes, and then we're going to drop the temperature down because we need the inside to get filled, to puff up and the inside to get cooked. Don't worry if after the first 20 minutes they don't look a whole lot different, because once you drop the temperature of the oven down, that's when they're going to puff up and they're going to cook on the inside. These don't collapse when they're cooked. So if you take them out of the oven, and I'll show that to you, but if you take them out of the oven and they collapse, it means you didn't cook them long enough. Okay? So I'm going to get these in the oven, and then when we're done cooking them, we'll take a look. Okay, so our first 20 minutes are up, and I just want to show these to you really quick. So when I bring them out of the oven, you can see these actually did brown up really well, and look at how much they puffed up. But you would think, oh, they look done. Now here's our little eclairs, aren't they cute? And these are our cream puffs, but see how big they got? And you think, oh, we're done. You're not, because if you take them out right now, when they cool, the insides are still raw. So they're going to fall flat. They're just going to collapse. And a lot of times with and I put them in the oven. I'm doing them for 15 minutes now at 375 because I want to keep an eye on them because they are browning really nicely. This is a fantastic oven. But anyways, it's new to me, so I'm pretty proud of it. What we want to do is we want to keep an eye on them, make sure they don't burn. And then when we get them done, we're going to poke a hole in the ones that don't have a hole in them so that steam can escape. Now, normally with the flour version, the wheat flour version, your regular all-purpose flour or bread flour, whatever you're using, they'll collapse. But then when you go to fill them, they poof back up again. Frequently, with the gluten-free flours, when they collapse, they stick. So you can't fill them and then have them puff back up again. With cream puffs, it's not quite as bad because we're going to cut the top off to put the filling in, but it's still better if they can rise up and they can stay. Now these you can freeze, so you can make a large batch and throw the excess in the freezer. You can fill them or not fill them and put them in the freezer. Either way is fine because they freeze really well and the fillings freeze really well. So anyways, I did 15 minutes, then I'm going to check them, and probably every 5 minutes after that. Some may come out, some may still not be done yet. That's not unusual. It's not an exact science when we put the amounts down. So the ones that had a little bit more, that are a little bigger, they'll take a little longer. Okay. Okay, so our 15 minutes is up, and so we're going to check them. I'm going to take them out and look at them. And they are beautiful. I mean, they are beautiful. They puffed way up the way we want them to. They're small, but remember they were supposed to be. If you look on the bottom, the cream puffs roll around, so it's hard to tell. But if you look on the bottom of the little mini eclairs, they're not burnt. They're just a golden brown, so these look beautiful. So what we do now is we are going to take a skewer, and the ones that don't have a hole in them, or all of them if you want, we're going to poke a little hole in the side. The reason why we're doing that is because we want the steam to escape without collapsing them. So we just want to poke a hole so this steam can escape out of them. Some of them will have a hole that's formed naturally. If they haven't, give them another one. Sometimes you just do them all anyway. Because otherwise, like I said before, it's normal for the ones made with wheat flours to collapse, and then you can fill them and they'll puff back up again. But with these, it seems that that's not necessarily true. So I just want to poke a hole in them so they can do that. And now I have another pan in the oven also, because it made two. I don't know if I got that one right there. We're going to cut the tops off of these when we fill them anyways. So it's not as big a deal. With eclairs, it really is, because you don't cut the tops of them. Typically, you just pipe them in from the side. So you want to make sure that they don't seal up on you. So we're poking a hole again in these. Just kind of let that steam out. How they cool matters. It's kind of like cheesecakes. With cheesecakes, how they cool matters. With these, I know my mitten looks kind of funny, but it really is clean. So how they cool matters. So we're going to leave them in the oven. The oven is off, and I'm going to let them cool for 5 minutes, just so they cool slowly. We don't want them to deflate again. And while they were cooking, I made a filling. And this filling is sugar-free. And what it is it is 8 ounces of cream cheese, which is just a block of cream cheese. 8 ounces of cream cheese. I have in here 2 tablespoons of honey, and I have a teaspoon of vanilla. That's gluten-free vanilla. I get mine from Mexico. And then I also have 1/4 of a cup of heavy whipping cream, and it is heavy whipping cream, and that has to do with the fat content. So it's a heavy whipping cream, and I just beat it up. When you're dealing with cream cheese, always remember whatever lumps you have in there when you add your first ingredient, you're going to live with. And that's true when you're making cheesecakes too. You want your cream cheese at room temperature, and you want to whip it really good, because if there are any lumps in there, clean your batters aside of the bowls. Any lumps that are in there when you add your next ingredient, whether it's sugar, whether in this case my next ingredient was honey, you're going to live with them. So you want to be really careful of that. And then this is the filling. It's just a white filling. Sometimes people use white frosting in them. You can use regular cream cheese frosting in there. You can use all kinds of different fillings. But this one was for a lady who doesn't eat sugar. So I wanted to make sure that we have it just slightly sweet. People that don't eat sugar aren't used to really sweet things. So we want it slightly sweet, tasty, but also, again, no sugar. So we're going to let that sit for 5 minutes, and then we will let them cool before we fill them and put their frosting on. Okay, our 5 minutes are up. So I am taking them out of the oven, and I'm still going to keep them on top of the stove though, so they have a warm place to finish cooling. And we're going to want to have them completely cool before we fill them. So while we're waiting for that to happen, I've got the filling made, and I will go ahead and make the frosting. So I will see you back in a minute. Alright, so now we are going to make the frosting, and I'm actually going to show this to you. I know some of the other fillings I kind of did behind the scenes. And this frosting, now the filling that I did with the 8 ounces of cream cheese, 2 tablespoons of honey, and 1/4 of a cup of whipping cream, and a teaspoon of vanilla is not in Loving Living Gluten Free. It'll be in the next edition. And this one though, The frosting that we're actually going to use for the eclairs is not with the eclairs in the book. It's going to be under the dark chocolate cake. And the reason being, again, I'm avoiding sugar. And there's sugar in the glaze that is used on the eclairs in the book. So we're going to use the chocolate frosting, which is a stick of butter softened, a third of a cup of honey, a quarter of a cup of cocoa powder, and a teaspoon of vanilla. And that goes into the mixer and it gets all mixed up and it makes an amazing frosting actually. And there's no sugar in it. And again, this is, and it is on the website, but you would find it with the chocolate cake with the peanut butter filling, not the eclairs. And again, it's Loving Living Gluten-Free. It's my book. It's just out. Loving Living Gluten-Free Recipes That Work by Kathy A. Babbitt, who is me. So, in the book, the frosting is going to be on page 115. So if you have the book, that's where you'll find this particular frosting. And I like this with children, especially those that have any kind of hyperactivity, because it doesn't have sugar in it. It's got honey in it. So the first thing we start with is softened butter. What is softened butter? And I've talked about this in other videos as well. Softened butter is not melted butter. If the butter is melted for this recipe, it's not going to work. And also, these would have to be refrigerated once you put the filling in them because of the cream cheese and because of the butter. And you want this to set up. So, softened butter. When you press on the butter with like your thumb or your finger, it's going to make an indentation. So when you press on it, it goes in. You don't have to like wrestle it to the ground, but if you press on it, it makes an indentation. That means it's softened. You don't want it melted. You do not want it melted. We're whipping it for one thing, but it's not going to work. So if you've melted the butter, let it set back up and get a different stick out of the refrigerator and then let it soften. Usually, and if it's really, really cold out of the refrigerator, 10 seconds in a normal microwave is all you need. You don't want it melted. So that goes into the mixer, and then we're going to measure out a third of a cup of honey. Now, I have rinsed out, washed it, but I wanted to leave a little bit of water in it so it helps the honey come out. This is a third of a cup, which sounds like a lot. I'm on the milliliter side here. So a third of a cup, and that goes in the mixer. Scrape your sides. And this is a dark chocolate, so if you don't like your chocolate really dark, then just cut back on the amount of cocoa that you use. Your cocoa is going to matter. Different cocoas have different fat content, and that makes a difference. It makes a difference in flavor, and it makes a difference in how it behaves in baked goods. This isn't a baked good, so I'm going for flavor. You can use a Dutch cocoa if you want. This is a regular processed cocoa. So this is a quarter of a cup of cocoa, and actually the cocoa that I'm using and have used for years, and there's some really good cocos on the market, but the one that truthfully I use the most is Hershey's out of the grocery store. And I bought some $15 cans of cocoa, and it's really good. And for some things it might be necessary, but for this, really the Hershey's cocoa works great. So I'm going to add that in, and then I need a teaspoon of vanilla. So let me get this turned on and get it mixing. If your butter is softened, you don't have to whip it a whole bunch first to soften the butter because the butter softens. And then I need a teaspoon of vanilla. Do not pour the vanilla over the mixer while the mixer is running. If it splashes, which it frequently does, you'll wind up with way too much vanilla. And once it's in there, I'm going to get it back out. So I'll do that. Okay, I'm going to turn this up now. Okay, like with any, you're gonna wanna scrape your sides, scrape your batters if you have two. And this you could probably do on a hand mixer. A lot of these you really can't, but this one you probably could do this on a hand mixer. I wouldn't try to do the actual batter for the toothpaste this way though, the Patachoux. Okay, so now what we're going to do, I need to get myself a serrated knife. What we're going to do on all of these is you cut the top off, and inside you will see that it has these pockets. Let's see if you can get a good image of these pockets. They're kind of air pockets, and this is what's inside, and this is where you got the lift. Remember, they started out just little balls and then they puff out. This is how they're supposed to look on the inside. They don't look wet because they're cooked. If you have some that look wet, I don't know that I would use them. You can try them. Sometimes they'll have a little bit of a sheen, but they should be dry on the inside. And then we have our scoop. You know, we love our scoops. I love my scoops. I love my portion scoops. And you can use a pastry bag if you want, or you can use a portion scoop. And you're just going to scoop a little bit of the filling inside, like so. And then you put the little lid on, and you have yourself a cream puff. Now you can put a whole bunch of filling like you see in the store, and they stand really up tall. Those are usually frosting inside of them, but they stand up really tall. But that's what's inside of there. It's just one scoop of the filling, and then we have our frosting that's right here, our chocolate frosting. And I'm just going to spread a little bit of that on top. And it's got butter in it, so it will have a little bit of a glossy look. Just like that. And you have a little mini cream puff. And again, this is in the book. The frosting is with the chocolate cake. It's not the glaze that is with the eclairs that's in the book. That glaze is great, but it just has sugar in it. And these are made without any sugar at all. There's no sugar in the Patachoux. There's no sugar in the filling. It's used honey for sweetener, and it's honey used for sweetener in the frosting. So again, once you get these filled, which I will probably not fill them today because they'll need to be refrigerated, and I don't want in refrigeration. Any type of a baked good will take on some, because it's a moist environment, moist, cold environment will take on some moisture, and I don't want to do that overnight. I'd rather just do that tomorrow before I take them, because they're for tomorrow. So I'll freeze the shells, and I'll put the filling and the frosting in the refrigerator, and I'll do them up tomorrow. And I hope you enjoy them. If you have any questions, please, the website is www.lovinglivingglutenfree.net, or .com. That's all one word, lovinglivingglutenfree.com. And there's two addresses to that website. So if you forget that one, the Babbitts, it's my last name, with my last name, BABBITTS, as in Sam, .net. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will get them answered as soon as possible. Thank you.